Hey folks, I'm LA Little TA today. I want to answer one question today. That question is this just a bump in the road in a long-term uptrend, or is it something more serious like what we saw in 22, right, where we had a fairly significant drawdown? So is this just another, bump in the road and we go right back up, or are we going to get some sort of a serious drawdown like we saw back here? That's the question. And so let's try to answer. We can't really answer the question of whether it's going to be that way. What we can do is say, here's the terms that would tell us whether it is or isn't a big drawdown. And the two things that stand out to me, I want to bring up to you. One has to do with the Magnificent Seven. These stocks, huge impact on the market, right? Because of their weighting, their size. And so when you look at them, and I'm just using the mags, which is all seven of the Magnificent Seven, and you can see here, again, long-term, bullish uptrend. Of course, this hasn't been around that long, this particular ETF, but it's been a long-term trend, right? You got to draw down now, and the question is this just going to continue on up? And I don't know that you can argue that it won't, because you've been on a long-term trend, but what you have to do is ask yourself, well, what would tell me that that's the case, that this is a long-term trend that's going to continue up? And what it is the bearish retest regen. This is a swing point low. It was broken on this bar, right? So this bar right here. And then broken again, this swing point low was broken on this bar. Okay, now it's gotten back over, these are called retest regenerates. In other words, you go back up and you try to regenerate to the downside. Well, this one is actually gotten back over. That's great. That says that more than likely, what was down, at least on this time frame, is probably sideways. And that's kind of what we see right now, is a sideways type action. The real question is, can it get over the next one? Because that one would give us an indication that we're probably going to go back to the highs. And that's this one here. And so when you look at that price point, you got 52.09. So until I see this thing close on a weekly basis over the 52.09, I'm going to think that this is sideways or potentially more down to come. If I get back over that, I'll start thinking, yeah, we can go back to the highs. So that's a good measure that will tell you. Now, I will point out over here that it is bearish and it's young on the MTTF. So in other words, this thing can go for a long time. This can go 6 months on a bearish trend. And so that's, back of your mind, think about that. Conversely, if you go over here and look at your ABCD structures, they're all bullish to the upside. Two of them are in play. In other words, they're already there. One points to 48.59, the other one points to 51.67. 51.67 would get us over that bar. Now, it could just like spike over it, take out the 51.67 and close under it. So in other words, these don't necessarily turn us bullish again, but they are pointing upwards. If this long-term one was to be activated, which would mean that you'd have to get back over this high, then of course it's bullish, right? If you look at it over here, short term, you got a little TriStar Doji I've written about on X. You can follow me on X if you want. But that TriStar Doji usually says that you're going to get some sort of a retrace, and that's what it's trying to do. Now, notice here, on a short-term basis, you can do the same sort of thing. Here's a retest regen on a week, on a daily, and it's bullish. So in other words, if I close back down here, I'm starting to think, well, yeah, this thing is going to, turn back down and try to make a test of these lows again. And so, you've got things you can work with that give you information as the market proceeds here to tell you what it's going to do. The other primary thing you should be looking at is the semiconductor index. And the semiconductor index, again, long-term trends, that drawdown, another long-term trend, and now another drawdown. Now, look back at the last drawdown. The last time you had a drawdown was in here when you turned negative, and that's what we've done again. And so now the question is is that negativity that went all the way down to there, just like here, is that over with? Is this done? Is that what they needed to do, is flush everybody out? And so if I go look at it on a weekly, what would tell me that that's the case? Well, get over a bearish retest region that's significant. This one over here is a little bit far back. It's going to fall off the chart pretty soon. The ones that are more near are the ones you're more interested in. And if you look at it, two of them line up almost the same spot, and that's these two. So if you draw that across, it's this one as well as this one. They're almost the same top. Just take the higher one, which is here, which is 503,628. And so if I were to close over that, that would tell me the worst is over. We're probably going to new highs. Those are the two things I'm looking at to tell me, in addition, of course, with the indexes, but to tell me that this market is going to continue higher, or we're going to have more significant drawdowns. And again, if you go to the daily, you can do a retest regen off of this, which will give you more information. So in other words, when I'm talking about a retest regen, it comes back down and regenerates back to the upside. Now notice, here's your breakout. There's already a test. If you come back the second time, your odds are not nearly as good that you're going to regenerate. First time, you got pretty good odds. Second time, it's a coin flip. And so, if it comes back that deep, that's going to be bad news. Well, potentially bad news. If you go and look at it on the MTTFs, still fairly young. In other words, this can go a long time. And if you look at it over here, you've still got all bullish, no bearish ones in play, and you've got two of them in play, right? But again, they don't get you to the number that you need to get to. They only get you shy of that number. So this, to me, says, hey, you still have to be cautious. Yeah, you can play it long. I play it long myself, but you have to be cautious, and you actually have to expect, I would think, some sort of a retest to take place on the daily time frames before this thing really gets mojoing to the top side. I hope that helps. If it does, give me some feedback. Let me know. Of course, like this, share it, and set an alert. Thanks. Take care.